There's a popular idea that some ancient achievements are simply too advanced for the people who supposedly made them. The pyramids, a 2,000-year-old computer, steel that modern smiths couldn't reproduce. The explanation, we're often told, must be aliens or a lost supercivilization with forgotten powers. The truth is stranger than that and far more impressive. It was us. And the closer modern science looks at these so-called impossible technologies, the more astonishing the real human story becomes. So let me take you through the ancient technologies that genuinely stumped us, the ones we've only just cracked, the ones still lost, and why we can't explain it almost always turns out to mean we hadn't looked closely enough. Start with the ones we have, very recently, finally explained. Roman concrete is the obvious case. Roman harbors and domes have stood for 2,000 years, some of them still sitting in seawater that would crumble modern concrete in mere decades. For a long time, we genuinely could not say why. Then, in 2023, a team at MIT studying 2,000-year-old samples found the answer hiding in plain sight. Those tiny white chunks scattered through the concrete, called lime clasts, long dismissed as sloppy mixing, are actually a built-in repair system. The Romans mixed their lime hot, which spread these reactive specks all through the material. When a crack forms and water seeps in, it dissolves a nearby clast, and the mineral recrystallizes right inside the crack, sealing it shut. The concrete heals itself. We didn't understand that until 3 years ago. Not aliens. Just a recipe better than ours that we'd been staring at for centuries. Then there's the object that rewrote the history of technology, the Antikythera mechanism. In 1901, divers pulled a corroded lump of bronze from a Roman-era shipwreck off a Greek island, and it sat misunderstood for decades. We now know it was a hand-cranked astronomical computer, more than 2,000 years old, with at least 30 interlocking bronze gears. Turn the crank, and it predicted the positions of the sun, the moon, and the planets, forecast eclipses, and even tracked the 4-year cycle of the Olympic Games. It used a clever pin-and-slot gear to reproduce the moon's uneven speed across the sky. In 2021, researchers at University College London published the first reconstruction that fits all the surviving evidence. So we understand it now, and it is pure human genius. But here is the part that genuinely is a mystery. Nothing of remotely comparable complexity appears again anywhere for over 1,000 years. A civilization built a geared computer, and then the knowledge simply vanished. Not because of aliens, but because human knowledge is far more fragile than we like to believe. Which brings us to the technologies that were truly lost and only partly recovered. Damascus steel is the legend. Blades forged from Indian Wootz steel, patterned with flowing, watery lines, prized for being both razor-sharp and tough, when those two qualities normally trade off against each other. By around the 18th century, the technique was simply gone. And when modern scientists examined surviving blades, they found something incredible: carbon nanotubes and nanowires woven into the steel's structure, centuries before we had any concept of nanotechnology. The Smiths weren't engineering on the molecular scale on purpose, of course. They were following an exact, hard-won recipe involving particular ores rich in trace elements like vanadium and precise cycles of heating and cooling. When the ore source ran out, the magic disappeared and the method was lost. We still can't perfectly reproduce the originals. The Romans did something just as remarkable with glass. In the British Museum sits the Lycurgus Cup, made in the 4th century. In normal light, it looks jade green. But shine a light through it from behind, and it glows a deep blood red. For centuries, no one knew how. The answer, revealed by modern electron microscopy, is that the glass is studded with particles of gold and silver just a few tens of nanometers across, far too small to see, scattering and transmitting light in different colors. It is, in effect, Roman nanotechnology, achieved by craftsmen who could not possibly have known why it worked, who likely stumbled onto it and then guarded it as a trade secret. And far to the east, in Delhi, stands a wrought iron pillar over 1,600 years old that has barely rusted, when ordinary iron would have corroded to nothing long ago. The secret there is the iron's unusually high phosphorus content, which forms a thin protective film across the surface. Ancient Indian metallurgists didn't know the chemistry, but they made iron of a character that quietly protects itself. Some lost technologies, though, stayed lost. The clearest example is Greek fire, the incendiary weapon that helped the Byzantine Empire survive for centuries. It could be sprayed from ships, it burned even on water, and it terrified everyone who faced it. The recipe was such a closely guarded state secret, known to only a handful of people, that when the empire declined, the formula died with it. To this day, we don't know exactly what it was. That is a genuine, unsolved mystery, and notice that it isn't mysterious because it was too advanced for humans. It's mysterious because humans are very good at keeping secrets and terrible at preserving them. Now the achievements people most love to call impossible, the great builds. The Great Pyramid of Giza, 2.5 million stone blocks, some weighing many tons, raised with astonishing precision. Surely that needed something more than human muscle. It didn't, and we've recovered the methods. Wall paintings show teams hauling stones on wooden sledges, and experiments confirm that simply wetting the sand in front of a sledge cuts the friction by around 40%, making enormous loads dramatically easier to drag. And in 2022, a study of ancient pollen and sediment settled a long-standing question about how the stone reached the site. A now-vanished branch of the Nile, the Khufu branch, once flowed right up to the Giza Plateau, letting the builders float heavy blocks most of the way by boat. The pyramids weren't raised against an empty desert. They were built beside a river that has since dried up and disappeared. And the single most important site for this whole question may be Gobekli Tepe, in southern Turkey. It's a complex of massive carved stone pillars, some weighing tons, arranged in great rings, and it is over 11,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the pyramids by even more. Here's what makes it revolutionary. It was built by hunter-gatherers. Before farming. Before pottery. Before the wheel, before metal tools. For a century, we assumed you needed agriculture and settled towns first, and that monuments came much later, once people had the surplus to spare. Gobekli Tepe turns that on its head. People came together to raise something monumental while they were still foraging for their food. And some archaeologists now suspect the very urge to gather and build may have helped drive the invention of farming, rather than the other way around. No lost super race required. Just ordinary humans, far earlier and far more capable than we ever gave them credit for. Let me finish with the one that's pure myth, as a caution. You may have heard of the Baghdad Battery, a small clay jar holding a copper cylinder and an iron rod, presented as proof of ancient electricity. It's a wonderful story. It's also almost certainly wrong. There is not a single electroplated object anywhere from that time and place, and archaeologists overwhelmingly think the jar simply held a scroll. Yes, a modern replica can produce a faint current, but that doesn't mean anyone ever built it to. And that's the real lesson running underneath all of this. Every single time a technology gets branded too advanced for the people who made it, a closer look tells the same story. Not visitors from elsewhere, not a vanished super civilization, but human beings who were cleverer, earlier, and more inventive than we assumed, whose knowledge was sometimes lost and has had to be painstakingly rediscovered. The real mystery of the ancient world isn't who helped us. It's how much brilliance our own species has created, forgotten, and then had to learn all over again.